So our well, actually, when I check pages here that are tracking the economic impacts of flooding in Manila, a multi-period CGE analysis. An issue that actually we always have when the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council comes up with effects of flooding in geographical areas. Now, one of the things that they usually come up are damages in terms of agricultural loss and or deaths or injuries. But the question is how to really produce some feasible numbers on what are the economic impacts of disasters like flooding. So actually, this actually was the motivation of the just outline, so just give an introduction to what we're doing. This is just part of an interdisciplinary research project, trying to look at the different impacts of typhoons at the city level. Then looking at, and then what we did to try to get an estimate of what are the effects of flooding. So we had to do some interviews with firms in Metro Manila, and so that's we report also deeply on what the flooding impacts are, and differential impacts on firms. Then using that information coming from firms, we develop a simple general equilibrium model. It's the neoclassical valuation CGE model. And the shocks that were made into the model were actually the reports that were given by the firms to us. And then just share you some preliminary results. So there are two types of simulations that we did. So we did one static simulation for Metro Manila, and sort of a multi-period model for two particular cities where we were interested, Marikina and Pasig. We would have wanted this to be done with other cities, flood-prone cities in Metro Manila, but unfortunately our time is limited to that. And then just some this is again also very preliminary results for the study that we with Dr. Clarete and also Ms. Mayrocnos. Okay, so a short introduction. We know that the Philippines has what is in many indices, disaster indices, they rank high. And for example, in the recent, the 2009 Typhoon Ondoy, the indirect impacts that has been estimated that the country actually was affected in terms of a big chunk of our GDP was affected because of flooding and other impacts. And there's been a recognition that it might be important to look at the impacts also not only at the national level, but also at the subnational level. And in cities where now greater or majority of the population actually lives, and there's been a lot of trends towards greater agglomeration of both population and production. And therefore, it's important to examine the impacts of disasters at the city level. This again, as I said, this is part of our multidisciplinary assessment of the impacts of disasters in cities. So we have also researchers looking at the social sector, for example. I think Dr. Boyer is reporting the results in the other panel. Health, looking at also health and fiscal. The objective, what we wanted to initially do is to try to get feedback on the different effects of flooding among these different sectors, and then feed it into our results, which we have not yet fully done, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. So the focus is on Metro Manila, with looking at Marikina and Pasig. And again, the counterfactuals in this model came from information that we did with focus group discussions with businesses. And the baseline is the 2009 Typhoon Ondoy. Okay, so we initially wanted to do a survey of establishments. So what are the impacts of, although it's a little bit dated now, 6, 7 years now from the typhoon. We wanted to do a survey of different firms. But the initial feedback was that firms were not readily, did not readily provide us with that information. Because they say that actually it's confidential information. So what we instead of doing a survey, what we did was to hold focus group discussions with chambers of commerce. So we did talk to the Pasig City and the Marikina Chambers of Commerce. And actually, these are the results, summary of the results of these focus group discussions. So for micro and small size enterprises that are near the floodways, they were actually the ones that were most badly hit. And among the different size firms, so it's obviously it's the micro and small that actually closed. For medium-sized firms, they took 1.5 to 6 months before they were able to return to normalcy. There was a significant amount of cleanup that was undertaken. While for large-sized firms, so they were able to recover quickly. They had also, some of the firms already had some technology already available that could also mitigate the impact of typhoons. Some of them said that they were reporting at the lower level, but after a couple of weeks, they were able to recover immediately. We also asked what are the different impacts in terms of what were the main problems of firms in terms of their inputs into the production. So manufacturing firms were affected by the availability mainly of raw materials and also the destruction of their capital equipment. While service companies were affected by the lack of availability of personnel. So for example, the manning agencies or those who were actually those provided labor subcontracting firms. So that these were firms that were affected by the lack of labor. While large retail establishments which serve as relocation sites for the city populations, they were benefited initially by the typhoon because they were able to get a small boost in terms of their retail earnings. Okay, so what we did based on these different focus group discussions, we asked what portion of your labor or your capital machinery were you not able to use, and up to what time? So how many weeks did you get back? How many weeks passed when you were able to get back the labor force that was actually present before the typhoon? And these were some of the results. So for both cities, in many of them, so we did look at 16 sectors, economic sectors. Two of them agriculture and natural resources. Then 5 type of industrial sectors, including food, beverage, tobacco, textile, garments, non-metallic machinery, and then other manufacturing. And then also, I think around 6. We had nine service sectors. So we classified them according to their responses by sector, and then these are some of the results that actually came from the study. So for capital availability, the availability of capital, so it was very easy for services types of firms to get back in speed. Only it's the manufacturing firms that actually took some time. And in fact, the machinery types of firms actually took around 27, machinery electrical industries firms took around 27 weeks before they were able to recover in Pasig. But in Marikina, they were able to adjust around the period of 11 or 12 weeks. Okay, so for those affected in Marikina were mainly food, shoes, cosmetics, and service firms, especially SMEs in terms of capital availability. In terms of the labor availability, most of the firms reported that after a few weeks, there were many of the laborers that they had were able to report back. So in Pasig, around the third or fourth week, and then in Marikina around the fifth or sixth week. And then in Marikina, what actually took longer in terms of services firms were the banks, because they had to take time. When we had a focused discussion with them, they said that, for example, they had to dry up the money that they had that was affected by flood. And then for the availability of labor, so the only industries in Pasig, the only industries that actually needed agricultural products were assumed to be affected by the lack of raw materials. So in terms of raw materials, also they're affected by blockages also in Manila after the typhoon. So I think this is not labor availability, but rather availability of raw materials. So what we did was to get this information and try to feed it into our model. Okay, so this is just a model that illustrates the stocks and flows in a local economy. A simplistic model. There's some flows that I do not illustrate anymore. And so what we did for Metro Manila and for both Pasig and Marikina, because there was no existing sub-national or even city data, was to try to use try to estimate in terms of their population or the shares in terms of numbers of firms, to develop input-output table that can try to provide information on output, and also inputs actually provided by these different firms. Of course, there's no consumption data that's available at the city level, so we had to use the existing surveys just weighted by the population share of the city. And then got data on national and local government data from its fiscal accounts. And then since Metro Manila, if some of you are familiar with this type of modeling, so this is usually done at the national level. So at the local level, what we did was to look at what are the flows of, there's a data set called commodity flow. So what are the flows of commodities that come into and outside of Metro Manila? And using the information, so we calibrated it to both at the national level, at the Metro Manila level, and also at the Pasig and Marikina city level. And based on the focus group discussions that we had, we tried to develop a counterfactual based on what are the disruptions of labor factors that move from households to firms. So one area that we did look at are what is the disruption in terms of labor and capital that flow into to firms, and what are the costs of trying to bring all of these inputs into the production process from outside the city or from outside Metro Manila. Okay, so that's so in our static analysis of Metro Manila, so these are the initial results. So based on looking at different types of counterfactual, so CC1 here is one level of typhoon effect. So if the effect on the flow of labor or capital is low of a typhoon or a flood event, so that's the lowest, the counterfactual with the least intensity, and we have a counterfactual for the greatest intensity here. So for most of the 16 industries that we included in our model, it's actually the textiles and garments and hotels and restaurants industries that actually are affected by the flooding. And in terms of the scale of production, it's the agriculture and construction services increase. There are other sectors like real estate which actually hardly change. So the, uh, the, 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 the typhoons actually impact more greatly the textiles and garments and hotels and restaurants industries. And these are shown here by the blue line, so this one, and also this yellow line for the textile and garments industry. In terms of price increases, which actually sectors that actually show the highest price increase? So all industries experience an increase in prices. The highest price increases are for public and private sector, followed by hotel and restaurant services. And the lowest increase is for the real estate and financial sectors. And then we also calculated the equivalent income variation, which is actually the amount of money that consumers are willing to pay to avoid typhoon or flooding scenario. And our estimate in terms of on the model that we have is that a flood event actually will impact Metro Manila between around 1 to around 12.2% of regional GDP. So that's a static analysis for NCR. For Pasig, we tried to also look at what are the effects now on sectoral production. Will production normalize immediately, or how long would it take until production will normalize in that city? So we found out that most industries actually go back to their pre-flooding output levels at the 29th week. So you here see some increases for some industry, like initially some increases in terms of the non-metallic industry, but eventually they're impacted negatively, and most actually become normal after around 7 months. For Pasig, what we observed was that except for 2 sectors, most industries do not eventually go back to their pre-flooding levels, except maybe for private enterprises and actually construction. There's some recovery by the 12th week, but again, I said that most of the sectors actually do not go back to their normal levels, which is actually 1. Next slide here, we computed what is the loss in terms of economic output based on the information that we have. So, as shown here, the loss in terms of economic output is actually quite large. For Marikina, the degree of economic loss for Marikina and Pasig is almost the same. So, in proportion, the loss is larger actually in Marikina, because Marikina's economy, as we estimated, is around just 1/3 of Pasig. And therefore, our conclusion is that we know that the effects of disasters are actually very significant. The decline in Pasig is on the average during these 29 weeks is around ₱500 million per week. In Marikina, it's around 620 million pesos per week for the 12-week period. There are additional losses, but because again, the production does not go back to its, for many of the sectors in Marikina do not go back to its normal levels. And therefore, of course, the losses are actually also very significant in Marikina. And using some equivalent variation of income, we find that the economic loss in both Marikina and Pasig is around 22 billion pesos, which is in the middle range of our estimate for different types of typhoon intensities in Metro Manila. And therefore, we think that analysis that is undertaken in areas, if we focus our analysis on specific areas that are hit by flood, by Metro Manila, not all cities are actually by floods, the same, no? We'll maybe actually come up with some reasonable estimates, no? And if this can be calibrated at the shortest time period, no? It allows some better level of analysis, no? In terms of disaster. Thank you very much.